Hi there and welcome to the channel and to this, the September wrap. Now this wrap will be markedly different from any of the previous monthly wraps I've recorded. That's because in the month of September I only managed to read a single book in its entirety, and that's because I've been so busy with my new job teaching freshman English composition at National Taiwan University. I'm really enjoying my job. I'm loving it, in fact, but it has deprived me of the necessary leisure time in which to read. So just the one book this month, and it was Stendhal's masterpiece from 1830, The Red and the Black. I read it in this English translation by Burton Raffle, published by Modern Library, and while the translation was fine, I don't like the paper upon which these editions are printed because it just doesn't take the pencil very well, and as a prodigious note maker, that is bad news for me. So I may get this in another edition. I do wish to read it in the original French too. Now, for those not familiar with this novel, it tells the story of Julien Sorel, born into humble circumstances. His father is a peasant who owns a sawmill. His two brothers are uncivilized brutes. However, Julien is of a sensitive disposition and the ladies all find him rather attractive. He's a kind of Byronic hero from an early age, and he wishes to advance. Indeed, he wishes to conquer society, just as his hero Napoleon did. And so through the church, he begins his rise and becomes a tutor to the mayor of the town in which he lives, and promptly seduces the mayor's wife and begins a torrid affair with her. When that breaks up at the end of part one, he moves to Paris to an even better job and becomes assistant to a marquis, and then again repeats the pattern, seducing the marquis's daughter. And these two love affairs combine to produce a tragic outcome. Okay, so there's a fair summation of the novel. What distinguishes this novel is the profound insight it possesses into human motivations. You basically have a ringside seat as Stendhal, the narrator, takes us on a guided tour of the human condition, and the only other writer I could compare him with in this respect for their deep understanding of human nature is Shakespeare. Yes, that's how good this was, and Stendhal did write a study of Racine and Shakespeare. So you follow Julien and the other characters as they learn, but also it's really brilliant at showing you how people fail to learn from what is going on in their lives. There's this constant misreading that goes on as characters fail to understand one another, and also it's quite cautionary in the way it treats works of art, because the characters will fall back upon literary models to try and appreciate what is going on in their lives, what course of action they should take, or to characterize the people they're meeting. And you see just the dangers of taking art as a guide to life. So all of that is in here, and pretty much on every page you'll find some startling insight, not only into the behavior of individuals, but of groups and indeed of classes. And that is what made this so satisfying. Dostoevsky was a big fan of Stendhal, so if you enjoy Dostoevsky, you're probably going to enjoy The Red and the Black too. And so this is my book of the month for September, Stendhal's The Red and the Black. Now, before I move on, I just wish to note, don't quit in the first 50 pages of this book. Like many classics, it does start rather slowly. If you keep going until page 100, I promise by then you'll be absolutely hooked. Okay, now to supplement my understanding of this novel, I had to hand these two volumes of the history of French literature by Castex and Scheurer, and these were used in French schools and universities throughout the 20th century. And so I'll just read you a little bit about Stendhal. Just the subheadings will be enough to give you a flavour of his life. So he was born in 1783, died in 1842. First he began as a student, then he became a soldier, then he had a period of time in Milan, and it's in Italy that he was happiest, it seems. Then he returned to Paris and was a dandy, and then he became a diplomat. and I'm not sure where he was posted. And then it goes on to what is so original about Stendhal. And it says it's his temperament, its passion, its analysis, its analytical bent. And then we have the kind of historical background. So he's writing of France during the Restoration, France under the July monarchy, and the way Italy informs much of his writing, particularly the Charterhouse of Parma. And then we have him composing an art of life. That's his kind of philosophy here when it comes to his art, which features the cult of the self, the cult of energy, and then the kind of literature. So it's a fusion, if you will, of the romantic and the realist. Okay, and then it also notes, the next entry is on Prosper Mérimée, who penned the short story Carmen, that the two of them were great friends. All right, so that's all drawn from my History of French Literature. I have another volume of that here. I picked those up for practically nothing here in Taiwan. And then there were some other things I read this month. Oh, before going on, I wish to just point out that Stendhal, I would rank it comfortably above Balzac's Père Goriot, which I read last month. And I would also say I enjoyed it more than Madame Bovary, although this is probably the greater work of art. Yes, but I enjoyed reading The Red and the Black more. The story appealed more to me, and I enjoyed the psychological aspects. Okay, so moving on, I did read some chapters in another book by a French author, Pierre Bourdieu, the sociologist. And he also, like Julian Sorel and myself, came from very humble beginnings, and he also rose extraordinarily highly through the French education system. And in this book, there are two chapters in particular. I'll read out their titles, and I do recommend this book. Very good. And I used it as part of my teaching. So we have the production and reproduction of legitimate language. So here he investigates or develops his concept of cultural capital, specifically linguistic capital, and the way certain social classes dominate when it comes to being able to come up with the full range of appropriate responses in formal situations, and how people from lower down the social hierarchy struggle to even get their words out and are often cowed into silence. I presented that to the students in my composition class because I wanted them to understand their own position as people who are acquiring a stock of cultural and linguistic capital, and to realize that if they feel some of their classmates are ahead of them in terms of being able to summon up these responses, there may be sociological explanations rather than just individual differences. I think it's quite important to emphasize that and not think so personally about your own situation and the situation of other people. It makes a difference to know that the system is perhaps weighted against you, and there are measures you can take to overcome these disadvantages. And then rights of institution, which is also really good, about how much of the ways in which institutions work is to separate you from the rest of society and just permanently elevate you above others, something Bourdieu was very conscious of through his own educational experiences. So, Language and Symbolic Power, published by Polity Press. I picked this up very cheaply. You'd have to get it online, I guess, if you buy it new. This kind of academic book is quite pricey. Okay, so I also had time to read another short story from this Library of America collection, two-part or two-volume collection of Edith Wharton's short fiction. And in here I read one called The Moving Finger, which was an obvious takeoff of Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray, except it was rather socially conservative. Yeah, I think that seems to be a feature of these stories. Wharton, despite her many qualities as an artist, does seem to be rather in love with privilege in a way that Wilde was not. It was well written, but it wasn't particularly gripping. But I will plough on with these in the coming month because she is a writer of great merit. And that is just about all I managed to engage with in the month of September. As I said, I was so busy. So what I'll do before I go is show you a couple of the books I wish to read in October, all being well. So we do have another French writer, Haven't read any of his work yet, but it is Anatole France with this. I don't know how to say it. Thais. I don't know. It's kind of been chewed by mice or something like this, but never mind. And the paper is very, very dark, but we'll just give it a try. And then I want to read this short novel by Tolstoy, Haji Murad, also in the Modern Library editions that I don't particularly like, although I do like the cover picture here. That is tremendous. And then some more French writing. So I have this, Cocteau's Opium, and this is the diary of his cure, and it features some excellent drawings by him, 28 in fact, penned while he was suffering through withdrawal. And this is said to be kind of in the same vein as De Quincey's Confessions of an English Opium Eater and Burroughs' Junkie. I've dipped into it and there's some really interesting passages here. And then I'm going to finish my first Hugo novel, and it is Notre Dame of Paris. Not too long, should be able to get through that. I've read the first chapter actually. It's very much in the same vein as the work of Sir Walter Scott, which I absolutely adore. And then I treated myself last month to some new books, and one of them was this Norton Critical edition of The Princess of Cleves by Mary Magdalene de Lafayette, and this is generally recognised as one of the very first French novels, and it is kind of a history which is embellished with fictional aspects, and it kind of divided opinion at the time, as any groundbreaking work is wont to do. So that will also form a part of my reading for October. I hope your reading was more successful than mine. Why not give me a little list in the comments below of what you enjoyed in the month of September? I'd love some more recommendations when I do finally have some free time. Thank you to everyone who liked, subscribed and watched my videos this month. It's been quite a busy month actually for the channel. The back catalogue has been attracting considerable interest and the subscriber count increased quite markedly. So despite my relative quiet, things are progressing much as I hoped. Of course, I do wish to make more videos in October. Fingers crossed I'll be able to do that. But for now, all that remains is for me to bid you farewell in time-honoured fashion. So until the next time, be safe, be strong, nanu nanu.